With the continued release of poorly received Star Wars streaming shows, Disney seems determined not to let us forget about just how clumsily they've been handling the running of the Star Wars franchise. It all started, of course, with their sequel trilogy films. As I discussed in this previous video, these films failed to integrate one of the things that made the franchise connect with so many people in the first place, this being the philosophy and values from the Lucas era of Star Wars. But just what exactly are these important values made absent in the sequel trilogy? What is the major deep-running incongruence between the Star Wars sequel trilogy and the older films, which stops many fans from being able to accept these new films as faithful continuations of a singular saga? In my opinion, one of the biggest problems is the absence of the ethic of diligence, self-discipline and personal development, so intrinsic to the core messaging of both the original trilogy and the prequels. This aspect is one of the main driving factors in the themes, drama and conflict of these older films. Those who humbly submit to a path of discipline and self-development become heroes, and those arrogant enough to act as if they can thrive without it on sheer innate power alone become villains. One of the reasons Rey, the main character of the sequel trilogy, is rejected by so many is because of the disregard for this ethic in the sequel films. It's not something the character has to interact with, and furthermore, this whole thematic territory is mostly unacknowledged in the sequel films. So let's contrast that with the way this ethic is integral to the original 6 Star Wars films, and just why it's so important, why the sequel films are so empty without it. We'll begin with Luke Skywalker's character journey in the original trilogy. Luke starts as a farm boy who yearns for the simple thrill of adventure and escape from his monotonous trappings on his desert homeworld. He finds the adventure he yearned for getting swept up in a fight against the Empire and becoming the rebel soldier to destroy the Death Star. Even though this is not really highlighted in his story, that victory and the praise he receives for it probably makes him slightly arrogant, as it would for any young man who suddenly accrued great status for an amazing act of heroism. So that psychological state probably contributes to Luke's recklessness in The Empire Strikes Back, a trait Yoda scornfully points out to him in that film. Arrogant people can be reckless because they're overconfident in their abilities, so don't carefully consider the consequences of their actions. In The Empire Strikes Back, because of Luke's recklessness, so reminiscent of his father's, Yoda doesn't want to train him as a Jedi. However, since Luke can be used as a weapon against the Empire, Yoda eventually agrees to train him. When Luke learns his friends are in danger, he abandons his training with Yoda and races off to help them. Yoda warns him against this, but Luke ignores him, charging into the trap the Empire had set for him. This puts him in a battle with Darth Vader, which Luke is not ready for, and so loses as a result. All this serves as a series of painful and valuable lessons for Luke. Having learnt from these experiences, he becomes more mature and methodical by the following film, Return of the Jedi. In this film, Luke's no longer eager for a fight. Now he's willing to fight if necessary, but is ultimately more interested in securing peace, only using violence as a last resort in that pursuit. War and battle no longer has the adventurous appeal it once did for him. He's grown beyond that now. Through this character journey, he learns the importance of mastering oneself before taking on the rest of the world, before fighting enemies more experienced than him. Through racing into situations he's not sufficiently trained for, he ends up paying a price. After these hard lessons, he corrects his behaviour. Having practiced his Jedi skills more, he's able to defeat Darth Vader and be one of the key players in bringing down the Empire. After the original trilogy came the prequels, depicting the story of how Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader, and through this story, emphasising and expanding on the themes of self-discipline the original trilogy explores. Anakin is overtly arrogant, much more so than Luke ever was, and there are many factors that lead to this. It seems to be just part of Anakin's natural temperament, but beyond that, he is a special person thought to be the chosen one, strong with the Force, and theorised to have been created by the Force itself. He knows these things about himself, and so it inflates his ego. Like Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, Anakin does go through lessons to become humbled in Attack of the Clones, getting captured on Geonosis and badly losing a fight to Count Dooku. Indeed, for the film which follows this, Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is more measured at the start of his rematch with Dooku. He's still arrogant, warning Dooku about how much his power has grown since their last fight, but he consciously avoids repeating the same mistake he made last time, of charging into battle alone, without Obi-Wan to assist. Since this film is set several years after his first battle with Dooku, Anakin has had a long period of additional training to improve his combat skills and ability with the Force, and so, with Obi-Wan knocked out of the fight, Anakin's able to defeat Dooku. But, as the film progresses, Anakin's arrogance persists, ultimately bursting free in its most monstrous form. The way this makes him behave contrasts strongly with the example Obi-Wan sets. Obi-Wan is far more diligent, measured, and strategic. While Anakin may be more innately strong with the Force than Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan is more experienced, having trained for longer, and so their Force powers seem evenly matched in their battle. Anakin had the potential to become the more formidable of the two with more time if he'd been more aware of his own weaknesses and more diligent, training hard with humility to improve himself as a Jedi. The fact that Obi-Wan does have these traits of discipline and humility means he's well enough practiced to win against Anakin's natural power. By the time he chooses to fight Obi-Wan, Anakin hasn't sufficiently internalized the lessons of his past defeats. His arrogance is still directing his behavior and poisoning his attitude. So, once again, Anakin learns the very hard lesson that innate power is not sufficient without dedication to learning how to harness it, to master oneself before challenging others who have already done that work. Obi-Wan demonstrates that such discipline lends a great power of its own when he defeats Anakin and leaves him to burn in the flames he unwittingly invited. The thematic and ethical domain I've discussed here could be viewed as the animating spirit of Star Wars. It's where so much of the meaning can be found in the saga, where valuable, actionable lessons are communicated to the audience, i.e., it tells us things that have a fundamental truth to them, an understanding of which great use can be made in the real world. This is all now completely absent from the sequel trilogy. In this trilogy, character traits and abilities are set in stone almost immediately, with no progression towards any kind of higher goal or mastery of ability. Rey, the main character of this trilogy, is static. She doesn't need any form of personal development to improve her abilities. She's already more powerful than anyone else, able to harness that power without needing to learn how, and able to defeat elite warriors in battle without being trained to do so, competently using a Jedi weapon she's also never been trained how to use, and doesn't have more than a brief period of improvised practice with. There's nowhere for her to go from there, other than perhaps becoming a villain, but that doesn't happen. The guiding principle of self-discipline and the pursuit of self-improvement, which was so integral to the core of Star Wars, has now been abandoned. The heart of Star Wars has been ripped out, and as such, what remains is a hollow husk of what once was, the body of Star Wars, without the soul. I couldn't help but notice how similar to old Star Wars the anime Demon Slayer is. If you're interested, you might want to check out the video I mentioned earlier, discussing how Demon Slayer contains the lessons of old Star Wars I've been talking about here. Anyway, what do you think? Do you agree that this aspect of Star Wars is absent from the sequel trilogy? And does that even matter to you? Let me know in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, see you next time.